Good evening. Good evening. We now call this meeting of the Fairfield School District Board of Trustees to order. There is a quorum present. We've had proper notification, public notification, and we do have a quorum. So we'll proceed now. Dr. Green will come, and we will proceed with the election of officers.
Thank you, Pastor Jackson. First of all, we have nominations for the position of board chair. Are there any nominations?
Yes, I would like to nominate William Freak.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Miller has seconded that nomination. Any additional nominations? The motion to bring the nomination to a close.
Make a motion that come the nomination to a close on one said name. Right now, get a second.
A second.
Okay, there's been a motion to bring the nomination to a close and has been seconded. All in favor of Mr. Freak for chair, please raise your hand. It's 4, any opposed? Okay, congratulations, Mr. Freak. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for your vote of confidence on that. I have some very large shoes to fill, and I recognize that and appreciate it. So, moving on, we'll open the floor to nominations for vice chair.
Mr. Chair, I got to get used to this. You know, I've been saying, Madam Chair.
Me too. Me too.
Yes.
So if it's
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Reverend Carl Jackson Jr. as being our vice chair.
All right, Reverend Jackson has been placed in nomination. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Any further nominations?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion that this nomination come to close on one said name. Right now, get a second.
I second.
All right, been motioned and second. All in favor of Reverend Jackson being vice chair, signify with your right hand. We have 4-0. Any opposed? No opposed. All right. Congratulations, Reverend. All right, moving on. Board secretary. We need nominations for board secretary.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Miller.
I'd like to nominate board chair Ms. Sylvia Harrison. Right now, get a second.
All right.
I second.
That's been motioned and seconded. Are there any further nominations? Motion and nominations be closed.
Make a motion that the nomination be closed on the one said name.
All right.
Provide that get a second.
Reverend Jackson seconds. All right. All in favor of Ms. Harrison as secretary, please signify with the right hand. 4-0. It appears. I don't see any opposition to those. All right. Well, thank you very much. That will conclude the nominations for officers. At this time, we will go into executive session. I believe, even though we are 5 minutes later than we normally would be on that, I don't think we have enough to worry about overcoming 6:30, so we will be out no later than 6:30. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we enter an executive session.
Provide, second.
For legal, personnel, and contractual matters, and perhaps an appeal issue?
Legal matters and contractual matters and
Student appeal?
student appeal.
All right.
Provided I get a second.
I second that.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. It appears to be 4-0. So we'll go into executive session, not to exceed 6:30.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to exit executive session, which no actions were taken, provided I get a second.
I second that.
All right, Ms. Harrison made the motion, Mr. Miller makes the second. All in favor of exiting executive session, raise your right hand. 0. As soon as I get my computer working. Well, welcome. I'm glad to see everybody's here to hear the audit report this evening. No, it is not, okay. At this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Harrison for the pledge.
Will we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence? Moment of silence. Thank you.
All right. This time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion we approve the agenda, provided I get a second.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Harrison moves, Mr. Miller seconds. All those in favor of approving the agenda indicate by raising your right hand. Any opposed? 5-0. All right, public comment. I don't believe we received any public comment. All right, next will be presentation and recognition. I'll turn it over to Dr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a pleasure having so many folks here join us for this November school board meeting. It is a happy yet a sad occasion. Many of you probably have heard that Ms. Beth Reed, who has served as school board chair over many years here in Fairfield County, passed a couple of weeks ago. We are very saddened by that, but we celebrate all she did to help move the Fairfield County School District forward. And so I want to take this opportunity today to present a proclamation to her husband, Mr. Colonel Herb Rentz. If you could come on up, Colonel Rentz. And I didn't know Colonel Rentz was going to wear my bow tie club bow tie. That's a shout. We almost like twins right there, okay. Yeah. So, but I want to read the resolution, and the resolution states that the employees of the Fairfield County School District and its Board of Trustees share in the bereavement of Ms. Elizabeth Beth Reed, who served faithfully as a member of the school board for 5 years. We wish to express our deepest gratitude and profound respect for a gallant woman who worked tirelessly to enhance the lives of all children in Fairfield County. Whereas Ms. Beth Reed placed public service above self and was a steward of education. Whereas Ms. Beth Reed worked meticulously to achieve the goals of the district. Whereas Ms. Beth Reed served the district with dedication and devotion. Her deeds displayed commitment in the personal, artistic, and academic development of the children in Fairfield County. Whereas Ms. Beth Reed's true legacy lies in the profound effect she had on the countless students she met and taught throughout her career. Whereas Fairfield County School District will continue the efforts of Ms. Beth Reed, and therefore be it resolved that in the loss of our respected and departed friend and leader, Ms. Elizabeth Beth Reed, Fairfield County School District will endure the loss of an irreplaceable champion of education. And whereas the passing of Ms. Elizabeth Beth Reed has created a certain void in our community, we express our deepest heartfelt sympathy and pray that you are comforted in this time of need. Be it further resolved by the Fairfield County School District and Superintendent of Schools, Dr. J.R. Green presents this resolution of service and dedication to the family of Miss Elizabeth Beth Reed. Let's give a round of applause.
This is what my life is all about right here. All the excellent students and parents with me. Keep up the good work.
All right. Obviously, we are all at a loss, and her, we suffer with you. We all enjoy working with Beth, and we're going to miss her greatly. However, there are also celebrations to be had. I believe next we have a recognition for our JV football team.
Yes,
Good evening.
Good evening.
On behalf of the Fairfield Central High School Athletic Department, I would like to thank the Fairfield County School Board, Dr. Green, district officials for taking the time to recognize the 2017 JV football team for their perseverance to an undefeated season. To the JV football. Football team, I'm extremely proud of your accomplishments. However, do not be content. As many of you will play varsity next year, please continue to build on this milestone throughout your years at Fairfield Central High School. In the words of Dabo Sweeney, it is good to be great, but never be satisfied. Before I fully recognize the team, I ask that all JV parents would you please stand. JV football. For your hard work, for those of you that help with the games, feeding the kids and be fussing about them dirtying the bus with the food, I want to thank you for that. I don't think people recognize how important parent parental support is as it relates to school and athletics. At this time, there are a lot of JV players that are missing at this time. I do apologize because they are helping the varsity prepare for Emerald for this Friday in the third round of playoffs. And we need as many players as we possibly can to progress to the next round. So I apologize for them not being present, but at this time I would like to recognize head coach Carlos Hill with the JV football team.
All right, thank you for coming out. Those of you who have supported us throughout the season, as Coach Rose stated, especially the parents. You've raised some fine young men. Continue to do a good job with them. We'll do our part on our end. You do your part on your end. As Coach Rose said, we have a great deal of players who are actually on the practice field right now as we speak, helping to prepare our varsity team for the third round of the playoffs. And hopefully we'll see all you out there Friday night. It's going to be a little bit chilly, but I'm sure Coach Rose will have some hot chocolate on sale to set the stage. So, come on out Friday night and continue to support the Griffins. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all very much, and to the parents, thank you for your sacrifice, and good job working them up for Emerald too.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
If I could just say one thing. I am extremely proud of these JV boys. I just take some exception to something that Coach Roke said. Don't come in here and quote Dabo Sweeney. You recognize that I'm a University of South Carolina graduate. That's blasphemy. I don't want that to happen.
Dr. Green, I will have to second that as well. It took me 8 years to get out of the university, and I finally got out. I believe next up we have a presentation for the STEM, high school STEM. Is that correct?
Ms. Swilly and the STEM cohort 1 students will come and make a presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I have with me some of the STEM students from STEM cohort 1 who had the awesome experience afforded to us by our school board, our superintendent, all of the other supporters in our community to actually travel abroad to England. So we want to share with you just a short video kind of compiling our tour so that our future Griffins who we have in the audience can see what's ahead of them should they endeavor to participate in our STEM program, as well as we're excited to announce that we are preparing to travel to Spain this June with STEM cohort 2. So we'll be traveling to Spain with them, but we're going to showcase at this time STEM cohort's 1 trip to England.
England was the first day where we went to London, and we were able to eat on the London Eye, which is really huge, very good, and it took you so far in the air, and you got to see like basically all of London. You got to see Big Ben, you saw cathedrals from a bird's eye view. It was great.
My name is Anderson, and my favorite experience from England was going to the Roman baths and seeing all the historical sites and the cathedrals and everything. And we had the opportunity to go shopping, which was amazing. And going to our first Primark and have 4 floors of shopping, and just having a great time eating good food and everything, and just enjoying ourselves. I went on the England trip. My favorite part is most of the landmarks and just having the experience as a group and being able to see my principal out of her comfort zone.
Hello, my name is Trace Swan, and I was a part of the STEM 1 England trip. I believe my favorite part about the trip was going to see, Stonehenge and Big Ben and the Salisbury Cathedral. All these things you'll see on TV. You'll be watching PBS and you'll see, oh look, there's Big Ben up there, and you can hear the chimes through the television. But seeing it, hearing it in person, touching the stones of Stonehenge and seeing the incredible height of the cathedral. There's something different about that really moving experience.
Hi, my name is
Montgomery Robinson, and my favorite part of the STEM to England trip was on the last night when we went to see the Shakespearean play 12th Night. That was like the icing on the cake to the whole trip because it was in the amphitheater and the whole scenery, it was open and the stars were out. It was just a really beautiful way to end our trip. And it was just, I'm very grateful for that experience all in all.
Supported us, and our superintendent who supported us on this endeavor, and we just appreciate it, and we are excited about the next tour, but we're excited that these students are again our trailblazers. They've been our trailblazers for STEM 1, and we will get to see them graduate 2 times. So they graduate from Midlands Technical College with an associate's degree in May. And then they graduate from Fairfield Central High School on June 9th. So
I wanted to go to England. I was born there. Thank y'all.
Thank you for the card.
Yes.
And thank you all for y'all's representation of Fairfield County and Fairfield Central High School and Fairfield County School District. We are all beyond words proud of this first cohort that's going through. Next up, I believe we have the Magnet School Academic and Teacher Achievement.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Board Chair, board members, and Dr. Green, it gives me great pleasure to recognize these young people for their academic excellence. So when you hear me call your names, I'm going to tell the audience and our board members what you're getting recognized from. Dr. Smalls will give you your award. I'm asking you to remain up here because after all of you have come, then we'll get our one big group picture, and then everybody can give you a big cheer for being smart, should I say. So I'm going to start with Zia Carabo. She knows I can't say her name, so I've shortened it. Zia is being recognized for exemplary in ELA and math. Aaliyah Mayfield, she's being recognized for exemplary in ELA, math, reading, and she scored 96th percentile in the ELA. Krishi Patel, Krishi is being recognized for exemplary in ELA, reading, and math. He scored 95th percentile in ELA, and Krishi scored a perfect score, 99th percentile in math. Jamira Anderson, exemplary in science, social studies. She's also one of the art students who helped Fairfield Magnet School have the highest score for 2 consecutive years in SCAPE assessment.
Ms. Whitfield, you said the whole state.
You mean Krishi?
I mean, yes.
The young man?
No, the art.
The art, yes, in the whole state for 2 years in a row. The Princess Bird, exemplary in science, social studies. She's also one of those art students that help us get the award for 2 consecutive years in a row. Graham Douglas, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, and math. He scored the 97th percentile in ELA. He scored the 98th percentile in math, and he's one of those great art students that help us. Joseph Gonzalez, exemplary in science, social studies, and math. He scored in the 90th percentile in math. Brian Metz, exemplary in science and math, and he's one of those fantastic art students that help us get that highest score 2 consecutive years. Camille Robinson, exemplary in social studies, reading, math. She's also one of those famous art students that helped the magnet school get the highest score for 2 consecutive years. Grant Taylor, exemplary in science, social studies, reading, and math, and he's one of those art students as well. Tamara Trapp, exemplary in science and math, and also one of those fantastic art students. Tavitra Ampansa, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, and math. She scored in the 93rd percentile in ELA and the 91st percentile in math, and one of those fantastic art students as well. Alexia Hernandez, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, math, scored 99 percentile in ELA, perfect score in writing, 98 percentile in math, scored a perfect score, as I said, in writing, and one of those fantastic art students. Eddie Hopkins, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, math. He scored 98th percentile in ELA, 93rd percentile in math, and one of those fantastic art students as well. Ashton Mamaleo, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, and he scored 90th percentile in ELA. Gianna Rhodes, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, math, scored 95th percentile in ELA, scored 93rd percentile in math, and she is one of those fantastic art students that helped the magnet school get the highest score. Kiana Sampson, exemplary in social studies and ELA. She scored in the 90th percentile in ELA, and she is one of those fantastic art students. Trinity Scott, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, scored in the 99th percentile in ELA, and one of the art students that helped the magnet school have the highest scores for 2 consecutive years. Jalen Swilly, exemplary in social studies, ELA, and reading. He scored in the 95th percentile in ELA. Iden Tidwell, exemplary in ELA, reading, math, scored in the 91st percentile in ELA, scored in the 95th percentile in math, and one of the art students that helped the magnet school have the highest scores for 2 consecutive years. Jonathan Warren, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, scored in the 93rd percentile in ELA, and one of those fantastic art students that helped the magnet school. Ruben Tucker, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, math, scored in the 99th percentile in ELA, art student who helped the magnet school win the highest score for 2 consecutive years. Josiah Jeter, exemplary in reading and in math. Layla Max scored in the 93rd percentile in math. Layla is also one of the art students that helped the magnet school win the highest score for 2 consecutive years. John Danielle Barnett. These are my babies who have moved on to the middle school. We don't forget about them because they helped us. She had exemplary in social studies, ELA, and reading. Kylie Burns. Kylie had exemplary in science, social studies, reading, and math. Tazara Doctor. Tazara had exemplary in social studies, ELA, and reading. Ava Ngaro. Ava received exemplary in science and in social studies. Christian James. Benji King, exemplary in science, social studies, and reading. Brittany Mickles, exemplary in science, ELA, reading. She scored in the 93rd percentile in ELA. Zuri Miller, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, and math, and she scored in the 93rd percentile in ELA. Aiden Mobley, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, and math, and Aiden scored in the 96th percentile in ELA. He scored in the 97th percentile in math. Todd Mount, exemplary in science, social studies, ELA, reading, and math. Chandler, as he likes to be known, scored in the 98th percentile in ELA and the 97th percentile in math. Exemplary in social studies, ELA, and reading, and Kristen scored in the 94th percentile in ELA. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a proud principal, and I know I have some proud parents out here.
We have one more presentation.
Yes, sir. One more.
I just just want to say, the bench is deep.
Testing. I have one more great award I would like to give. This award goes out to one of the best teachers I have in my school, and I have a lot. She gives a lot of her time for the students. She's worked extremely hard to bring our art program to where it is at the magnet school. We're always having our children participate in things in the community and at the state fair. It gives me great pleasure to recognize the leader of the art department at the school that was the spearhead behind our children receiving the South Carolina Arts Assessment Award for 2 consecutive years. Join me in giving Mrs. Daly a round of applause as she comes.
Congratulations, everybody. Thank you for the work you done. Well, I am shocked and surprised that it really cleared out. The next part of the thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy. It's my favorite part because every year I look forward to it. All right, we'll move on with the agenda. The next part of the presentation will be our audit report.
Is that good? All right, so what you've got in front of you, you've got 3 different things. You've got a pupil activity report, which is the thin little red book. You've got a thicker red book. That's the audit report and all the schedules as well as the notes. And then you've got a 2-page letter. And we're just going to start with that 2-page letter that's stuck in the front of your audit book. What you're holding, this is the communication letter. It's our required communication with the board about the entirety of the audit and its completion. And I'm just going to hit a few highlights here. Under the significant audit findings, there were no significant audit findings, and you had no new accounting policies or And no new accounting policies adopted this year, and all of your policies that you already had in place did not change as well. We noted no new transactions entered into by the district which lacked authoritative guidance. And we also noted that all significant transactions were recorded in the correct financial period. Next, the district has two sensitive estimates. The first of those being depreciation, the second being allowance for taxes receivable. As a part of the audit each year, we review those estimates to make sure they're still reasonable, and we found that they were. The next thing is disagreements with management. We had no disagreements with management over any of the accounting policies and procedures. And the last thing is management consultations with other independent auditors. If management was to go out and consult with another outside independent auditor other than our firm, they're required to disclose that to us, and no disclosures of that nature were made. And now, if you'll turn to pages 1 and 2 in the thick red book. So pages 1 and 2, this is the independent auditor's report. This is our report on your financial statements as a whole. The first section there is talking about management's responsibility. Management's responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And it's also charged with maintaining appropriate internal controls over that financial reporting. Our responsibility as the auditors is to express an opinion based on reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. It's also our responsibility to conduct our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as governmental auditing standards. And then the last paragraph there under opinions, that's the opinion on the audit as a whole. It's an unmodified opinion on all funds. It's the highest and best that can be given. And these numbers are going to be really small. I tried to make this a little easier to understand, maybe. If you'll look at pages 12 and 13, and I don't know, y'all might not be able to see the screen, but I've got a comparative up on the screen of what I'm about to talk about. So pages 12 and 13, this is the statement of net position and statement of activities. These are your government-wide financial statements. They take all of your fund or your current financial information and build things in like capital assets, long-term debt, pension reporting, as well as the depreciation and the amortization on the pensions and the capital assets. So the year ended June 30th, 2017, the district had roughly $60 million in total assets. 36.8 million of that was capital assets. You had $560,000 in cash, and you had $21.46 million due from other districts, the county government, the feds, and the state. Of note would be $19.5 million, which is due from the county treasurer. So 19.5 of that 21 million has already been received by the district, but it's being held in a fiscal capacity by the county. The next thing is liabilities. This year you had total liabilities of $68.3 million. Of that you see $4.6 million of other liabilities. That's predominantly your payroll withholding liabilities, as well as your unearned revenues for taxes. You also had $9.58 million in outstanding debt with $881,000 due within 1 year. The next three numbers I'm going to talk about are your deferred outflows of resources, deferred inflows of resources, and your net pension liability. This year, your deferred outflows of resources were $7.7 million. That's up about $1.1 million from the prior year. But you also saw a reduction in your inflows as you didn't have any this year. And that's a almost $3.3 million reduction there. Your net pension liability this year, which is the reporting of your share of the underfunding of PEVA's, South Carolina Retirement System's retirement plan, was $54.1 million. That's an increase of almost $6.6 million from $47.5 million in the past. That number is going to continue to fluctuate as the years go on. That's based on an actuarial valuation as well as contribution rates, the number of employers in and out of the plan each and every year, as well as the number of employees coming into and out of that plan. The next page is that statement of activities. This is your government-wide revenues and expenditures, and we'll talk about your fund revenues and expenditures in just a minute. Just to give you an idea, for the year you saw $50.4 million in revenues. That's a slight decrease of about $27,000 from the prior year. And you had total expenses of roughly $50.1 million. That's a almost $3.4 million increase from the prior year. Now, if you'll turn to pages 14 and 16, if you want to just turn and stay on page 16. So what pages 14 and 16 are, these are your fund financial statements. So it's your fund balance sheet and your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Most often the question we get is, well, how did we do this year? And where we like to kind of walk through is your revenues and expenditures. What did you bring in? How did you spend it? And what were you left with at the end of the year? So I'm just going to kind of walk through these columns and talk about each fund. The first column there is the general fund. The general fund balance this year increased $137,000 to $9.44 million. That roughly equates to 25.9% of your fiscal year 17 expenditures, 24.8% of your 16-17 budget, as well as, I have the number, it's about 23-24% of your 17-18 budget. And the reasons you want to keep that healthy fund balance for cash flow purposes while you're waiting on your tax revenues to come in, your TAN dependency, your tax anticipation note, unanticipated events if something was to occur, as well as lessening the impact of state cuts, which the state tends to throw at us. Looking at your general fund revenues this year, total revenues this year are $37.1 million. That's an increase of $70,000 in total. Your local revenues increased $204,000 to $24.9 million, and they were $313,000 more than budget. Your state revenues decreased about $125,000 this year to $12.2 million, and were $417,000 less than budget. And then your total revenues in the general fund were $110,000 less than budget. Now coming on down and looking at our expenditures and our transfers in the general fund this year, you saw total expenditures of $36.4 million, which is an increase over the prior year about $834,000. Instructional expenses of $19.3 million represent about $103,000 increase, but they were $971,000 under budget. Your support expenses this year of $16.5 million represents a $34,000 increase, but we're also $729,000 under budget, which puts your total expenditures of under budget about $1.7 million. You had some transfers this year. You had total transfers in of $922,000. That's predominantly your EIA salaries and fringe that you're allowed to flex, as well as $82,000 in indirect costs. Transfers out of $1.5 million that went to the capital projects to fund future building projects. The next three columns there is your special revenue fund special projects, the special revenue fund's EIA, and your special revenue fund food service. Your special revenue fund special projects this year, that's going to be your state, federal, and your locally restricted money. But the majority of that spending is going to be Title I and IDEA. You had approximately 46 grants this year, totaling $4.6 million in expenditures. Next is the EIA funding that was created by the EIA Act of 1984. You get approximately 25 funding sources there, totaling $2.1 million in expenditures, in addition to that $869,000 transfer we discussed a minute ago. And on both of these, you're required to spend these funding types as the funding source allows and provides for. And you can carry most of these funds over for 1 year unless there's a no carryover provision, which is why we don't show a fund balance. We match our revenues to our expenditures for the year and either defer or postpone the rest of that spending to the next year. The next one we're going to look at is food service. Food service this year operated at $116,000 surplus, and that was prior to an indirect cost calculation. You ended the year with a fund balance in food service of $320,000. Revenues were slightly down by $17,000 this year. The next two funds we're going to look at are your debt service fund and your capital projects fund. Your debt service fund this year saw a slight decrease of $108,000 in fund balance to approximately $1.6 million. And your capital projects saw a $476,000 increase to $6.45 million. And just a note on the debt service, you have an $850,000 bond payment that'll be due within the year, and then you have $7,860,000 due in more than 1 year. And as well in the capital projects fund, you saw $1 million transfer from the general fund in, as well as $2 million from debt service. And at the end of the year, you entered into contracts totaling $2.3 million in that capital projects fund. Of that 2.3, you had spent about 1.2, so you had about 1.14 left to spend on those contractual commitments you had already made. Now, if you will turn to pages 68 through 77. There's the two letters in the back, the letter here. There's not a page number on it. So this is your single audit section. This works and deals with our audit of your federal funding. The first letter is the independent auditor's report on the internal control over the financial statements in accordance with government auditing standards. The second letter is your compliance with internal control over compliance by the uniform guidance, as well as your compliance on your major programs. For the first letter, with government auditing standards, we noted no instances of non-compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, and we had no internal control deficiencies noted as well. On the second letter, we had two instances on your major programs, which were IDEA and Title I this year. But we had no instances of issues with the internal controls. And those two findings, we tested eligibility for IDEA, and we had one IEP that was reported with the incorrect disability on it. It's since been corrected and is being reported properly in Power School. And the second finding was time and effort reporting, and there were 3 out of 28 individuals who were federally funded who did not either have a signed timesheet or have a semi-annual certification completed for their time. Now there's 2 more things that we're going to talk about. Adopted this year by any governmental entity is GASB 77. I don't know how much y'all have heard about this. This is fee in lieu of tax reporting. So what this requires, a school district, a county, a city, anybody whose taxes are affected by a fee in lieu agreement, either that they entered into or that is entered into by someone else that affects them, they are required to report the amount of fee dollars they received, the taxes that were abated, and the ad valorem taxes that would have been billed. Now, the assumption here that we have to keep in mind is the ad valorem amount is based on they would have still come had the FELO not been in place, okay? So just to give you your numbers, for June 30th, 2017, you received 0 fee in lieu dollars.
Where you read that?
This is on page, and I wrote it, I think it's page 36. It's page 36 at the very bottom. In a lot of words. So what this says is that the district, both general fund and debt service, received $0 of fee in lieu. Okay? After conversations that I've had and confirmations, we found that your taxes that were abated are the amount of taxes that were given up. In the general fund, that number was $1,513,566, and your debt service fund was $153,518. So if you had billed and received your millage based on the ad valorem assessed value, it would have been that in total $1,667,084, but you did not receive anything out of that, and that's because the FELO agreements did not have a portion written in to go to.
And who are these industries?
I have no idea who the industries are because it's all stuff that was done by the county. All you as a district are required to report is it in total.
I thought that there was a feeling that we did get funds from. So they're telling me that they were done?
Are you talking about the Santee one?
Yeah.
We've gone back and forth on that Santee one. We can't find anything that's actually written that there's a FELO with Santee.
Do we look back at previous audits to see whether they, I guess they just started?
It's always come in as FELO. Come in, and that's how it's reported here.
Okay.
But we've asked the county, we've asked the state, we've asked state legislature because that's where the county directed us. Nobody can really pinpoint it, and I didn't push.
And so, Mr. McDaniel, what I was saying
is the county had to provide this information to us, and if the county was aware that we were receiving some fee in lieu of revenue, I'm sure they would have reported that we were receiving revenue. And so the fact that they indicated that we weren't, I tend to believe that we must not be.
Yeah, but my concern is that we were at some point in time.
And you're still getting the Santee money. The Santee money, that has nothing to do with this 1.5 million.
How much was the Santee? You remember, you got an estimate?
Yeah, I do. It's $86,113 this year. And we asked both the county, I tried to get in touch with Santee and asked them if they knew. I couldn't get anybody there. And so I tried to get them, I tried to get we tried to get the county as well as anybody in the state who knew what the agreement was, the tax structure.
So that means they can stop giving it to us now since there is no regular video agreement?
That's not included. We weren't going to push them to the point where they said, oh, well, we just won't pay you. But the big thing here is, looking at your county numbers, as far as you did not get anything from the county, but I don't want to say you lost, but you were not to the benefit of 1.6 million had that industry still come and had there not been a field agreement.
And were you able to determine if any revenue came in from those 2 reactors that were started but not finished?
No. If it's in this or not, that the confirmation, because of what we have to report, to be honest with you, if you really want to know more about it, either talk to the county or wait till the county's audit comes out. Because the county has to report it to you, and they've got to report it in a much greater detail. So.
And Ms. McDaniel, I want to know, this is something that I took an interest in sometime earlier this year. I've talked to Dr. Green about this, and we are looking to sit down and have a conversation with the county to address this issue, to rectify anything that may be occurring that maybe not necessarily needs to be occurring that way. So we are looking to address that in the very near future.
Yeah, please find out if money do come in from STEM, how much we would have lost, just like, if it's not even this 1.5 cap, because I really would like to see.
Me too.
All right.
Okay.
The next thing I just... Yes, sir.
In Fairfield, how could they scratch the school board out?
That's a good question.
Mr. Mayor, that's one of the issues we're going to address with the county.
It's all about relationships. And who you vote for.
That's crazy.
So I'll tell you this too, because when I was talking to the county, they gave me another number. It's $587,767. That's the amount of money you could have received under the fee in lieu that you didn't. So you could have billed at 1.6, but your share of the fee in lieu was $587,000. That's the part that the questions arise on. And I think that's what Mr. Frick's talking about. Talking to them about what happened to that.
Well, that's going to be interesting, because in my conversations, the powers that be state that the county is the one who does the fee in lieu of, and they can, for whatever reason, choose to write the school board out. But like I stated earlier, no, it's not illegal. That's where we should be having conversations with the delegation. And if they would put local legislation in place, they should put local legislation in place to say that, which I understand home rule, maybe they can't do it, but to state that when fee in lieu of are done, that the school district should get their rightful share.
Oh, and I agree. And I'll be honest with you, this is a very unique case for me, because this is the only one that I've got that doesn't receive anything, that is affected. If we've got any others that don't receive it, it's because they just weren't affected. But this is, and I even had to call Gatsby just to make sure I was reading Gatsby 77 right, to make sure that you did have to report those two numbers whether you received anything or not.
Well, I'm glad they came up with that ruling there, because
it's
been suspect for a long time.
And I think that's just like Gatsby 68 and 71 with the pensions, tried to get the conversation flowing about the underfunding of these pension liabilities. I think the whole purpose behind 77 has been to start that conversation. Is there a fair and equitable distribution of what's coming in from a fee load to all the participants? So I think it'll start the conversation. Well, the last thing I want to talk about is Act 23. So Act 23 was signed into law by Governor McMaster mid-May. And what it does is creates an early warning detection system for school finance. There's one on the educational side. There were a couple of districts who were going down the bankruptcy path. Y'all were not on it. But it drew calls for concern from state legislators, because all of the debt and all of the goings of the school districts backed by the full faith and credit of the state of South Carolina. And they started getting audit reports that were dwindling fund balance, and they had no idea it was coming. So Act 23 was created, And what it does is it puts a hierarchy. There's 3 levels, and there's different ways to get on each level, and I'm not really going to go into all the different ways, because as a task force, we're actually still trying to put policy and guidelines behind how that's going to look. But the big thing that everybody's talking about this is with fund balance. One of the things it requires by state law is that you have 1 month of fund balance. And there's 2 different levels that require it, and there's 2 different tests we now have to do, which we've always done in the past, as you heard before, about your fund balance percentages. So just to give you those numbers, test 1, you take the prior 2 fiscal years, you're looking at the general fund only, you take certain expenditures into account. So your fund balance of $9,440,824 at the end of the year exceeded the state required fund balance of $6 million, or by $6.5 million. You had 26.6% coverage. That's, from a state aspect, that's great. 3 times, rock on. We always say we like to see districts, obviously, at 16 to 24, just to be safe. So I think a month on the state department, or on the state legislature side is low, but I'm glad there's something there. So test 1, you look at the prior 2 years. That's to go on the lowest level. To go on the intermediate level, you look at just the prior year. So again, your fund balance of $9,440,824 exceeded that amount by $6,459,000. So you were at 26.88%. So you have no worries on that. But I just wanted to mention it because I know a lot more is now coming out about this act. Because you're going to see, last count from 2016 was about 16 districts in the state of South Carolina will go on this watch list just because of their fund balance. So it's something to be aware of. It's something that we look at every year anyways, and always report to you all.
Have they decided what consequences are going to be for those districts? I mean, takeover by the state is...
We're still playing with that. We've got, and just so y'all know, there's a task force that's been created by the State Department of Ed. I'm on the task force. We've met 5 or 6 times, coming up with the guidelines of how this is going to play out. I mean, if you've read any legislation, they have the greatest intent, but sometimes what they're thinking doesn't necessarily go into what they're saying. So we've got some legislative changes we'd like to see happen to clarify the law, to make it, it's supposed to be escalating, to make it truly read as escalating, to make it harder for the state to come in and take over, as well as exactly what you're asking. What does it look like if I go on fiscal watch, which is the lowest level, or fiscal caution, which is that intermediate level? You know, what does it look like? I know I have to do a recovery plan, but do I get a chance to tell my side prior to that? We're trying to make sure that that's to the district's benefit at every level, that you get a chance for the State Department to say, you're going to go on this watch list, what's going on? Let's talk through this. And that'll be a conversation with the school, the board. They talk about bringing the auditors in too, if it has to do with audit findings, to get a true perspective, a full perspective picture of the district and what's going on, what led to this. And there really are. I mean, the State Department, to Michael Tom's credit, he does not want to take anybody over because they, most of us know.
Well, he should have learned about one of the districts he was in.
Well, but they're having to get manpower just to do that, to provide the technical assistance. That's one thing they will do as a State Department, will be provide technical assistance on helping those districts figure out where they can cause that fund balance to increase.
But now they're in the Abbeville school districts on that list.
Yes.
Because
there's actually a good number of them.
You could beat somebody all day long and tell them you need some money and you need to have a fund balance, but if you don't have a tax base to give it, you just don't have it.
Or exactly. And tax base, millage increases, industry. There's a whole bunch of factors that hit right, 07, 08, 09, that caused a lot of these districts to drop below a month, and they're fighting tooth and nail to come out of it. And that's really what we're trying to make sure is that somebody who's, let's say, $800,000 below that level, but they're putting $50,000 a year in that fund balance in general fund. We're trying to make it the least punitive possible in somebody like that. It really is trying. I mean, the way the law is written right now, if you go on any 3 levels 3 times at any time, it could be now, 5 years, and 15 years down the road. That makes you a candidate for state takeover. That's absolutely absurd. Because what happens today and what happens in 20 years has no forbearance on each other. So we're trying to get that escalating, that front level of help.
Congratulations on being the task force.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I did have some questions related to the actual order itself, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Go ahead.
Big one. Go ahead. Okay. On page, on page 12.
Yes, ma'am.
The 19,547, 972.
Yes, ma'am.
What did you say what they got?
Yeah, that's the due from county treasurer. That's money you've already gotten in. So like you do your State Department claim, let's say for Title I, it's $1 million. That money comes to your county treasurer. So that's actually cash at the county treasurer. The district hasn't drawn down yet.
And this is as of June 30th, 2017?
Yes, ma'am.
Did we issue a plan this year?
Yep.
How much is our monthly expense?
How much are they monthly?
Any idea?
The way they're calculated on 23, that's all I've got. For 17, it was almost $3 million a month. 8% of your instructional support and governmental expenditures, not including capital and debt service. That's $3 million a month.
If I may, and I was going to say about $4 million, but out of the funds due from county treasurer, a portion of that is funds reserved for capital projects, a portion of that's funds reserved for in the debt service fund balance. So some of those funds are not available for just regular operational flow expenditures. So the number appears high, and also at June 30th, we're getting into the summer months, July and August, when we receive the lowest amounts from our state funding. So from June, looking forward into roughly October, the revenues we receive are a lot less than we would normally receive. So that number is going down significantly from June 30th up until January.
Okay, so you're saying there are funds in here other than just general funds, so this includes debt service money?
Sure, because any tax revenues received for debt service are technically on hand with the county treasurer, but those aren't funds that we can draw down to use to pay operational expenditures. So I'm saying in that total balance, you have some funds that are reserved for other purposes that we can't use for operational expenditures.
Do you have a breakdown in here somewhere?
There's not a breakdown in here, but that's what I was just about to look at. That's what I was going to say. Turn to page 14. So to give you a rough idea of it, if you look at your due to, due from, so how much is owed from another fund, how much is owed in between your funds. This is your interfund payables and receivables. So your debt service fund has a due from other funds of $1,573,257. The majority of that is going to be money held at the county treasury. Your capital projects fund of $6,497,298, I would I would lean towards the bulk of that sitting in your due from county treasurer as well.
Now you can use that, right?
Typically, if we have, the funds are used, but they're used for capital projects expenditures. So in other words, we don't use the funds to kind of supplement operational funds out of capital projects.
Okay, because I thought she had all the money in the same pot except maybe debt service. And to keep from doing the 10, as long as you got it correct on your books, you could still go ahead and use it to kind of, let me ask you, about how much was the 10 for this year? Let me ask you.
4 million, I think 4.7, 4.6 million.
Yeah, it's 4.7, so. And the thing in y'all's situation is a little different, where you're committing that 1.5 million over as a board, because that's board committed money, it would have to be committed back. If you're gonna, of the money that's transferred. Does that make sense?
And another part of it, a significant part of the money in capital projects, from year to year represents short-term borrowing. So we're borrowing the money, saying that money is going to be used to fund capital projects. So when we have balance, a part of that balance that represents any money we borrowed, we can't then use those funds to pay for regular operational expenditures because we borrow the money saying that they're specifically for capital projects.
Page 13. Let me look a little strange for how do you justify instruction being basically the same as support services? The same amount of money that's spent.
Now the expenses that you see there, that total of $50 million, that's throughout all funds that we have. And so that includes general funds, special revenue funds, capital projects funds. Most of the capital projects funds are the function of them classified as support services. They're not direct instructional type expenditures. So when you're looking at all funds, food service is included in there. You're looking at funds that are not just in the general fund, and some of those other funds are going to have more support service classification instead of instructional classification.
That's still strange, considering the number of teachers we have in the districts and what we pay teachers, because wouldn't that account for salary increases in instruction?
That is correct.
That's a little strange. Okay. You stated I thought you stated that the EIA funds that weren't spent, you get a year carryover for all of those?
Well, not on all of them. There's some funds that have no carryover provision.
Now, where's the due? I think you went over it and I missed it. The due to state, or due to other governments?
So your due to state schedule
Yeah,
is on page 66.
That's it?
That's it.
Dang.
And I think that was maybe, I hope I'm not getting my districts mixed up because I got 10 in my head right now. Was that a trip, a conference that was paid for and then somebody ended up not being able to go? I think maybe that wasn't here.
No, I can't remember. I have to remember back to it.
Something that may have been this one.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. All right, my final question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the group activity.
Yes, ma'am.
include student organizations. We spent more than we collected. They had carry over from last year, so how does that happen?
Yeah, so you had $163,000 of fund balance. No, I'm not going to have the exact number. So at the end of the year, you basically had $130,000 in cash for pupil activity. So there's always, you've got a float there, basically. Because some years you're going to spend more than you collect, some years you're going to collect more than you spend. Just depending on what that club, in that little book that you got, that's the one that breaks down each school by club, revenues, expenditures, and transfers. So you can look at what cheerleading at the high school did for the year, or any of those different funds.
And when you all do the audit on it, y'all check to make sure that it's spent within what it's collected for?
So it's included. We don't opine on it, but it's included in the audit procedures.
All right, thank you, Madam. I need Mr. Chair.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask, as far as any kind of grant money that we get and we have to spend within a certain time, is there anything that's getting close to, have we lost anything this year?
Not that I know of. Y'all are, Kevin would know better than I would. Honestly, we're looking at what you spend. We're looking at what you spend, making sure you claim what you spend, making sure you claim it for what you spend it for. And then we do look at some of your carryover, but most of your federal grants now are running on a 22 to 28 month, I think. So you've got substantial carryover time. But that's the first place, and I think Kevin will probably know this. That's the first place Kevin's going to go, to make sure if you're when you're spending and when he's preparing for that next year, to make sure that you're fully taking advantage of any money that either has to be spent in that year on the items that it has to be spent on, and planning for that going forward. It's looking probably even into budget. So
I'm just asking that because I guess one time out of the 5 years I've been on, we did lose some money somewhere, one of the years. I don't remember what it was.
And sometimes, and I don't know what that circumstance was, but I've seen this happen before. Sometimes you just don't have those expenditures. And it's more frugal on the finance department of the district to say, we'll send this money back, and somebody who can actually use it for that, use it instead of buying frugals. I know a lot of people who've done that. But it's becoming more and more rare. The State Department's, for better or worse, getting stingier with what kind of money and who they give it to, and pre-qualifying you before you get it, to ensure that the money you get, you can use. And the money you get, you can use it wisely and quickly and efficiently.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any further questions?
Mr. Chairman, you
already said you want to ask your phone.
I wasn't, but since y'all not asking, I'm going to take up all y'all time.
All right, I'm going to cut you off.
I know you are supposed to be on the athletics. Is the booster club?
No.
They separate?
These are only district-wide funds.
The Baby Club, is that Baby Club to raise the 18,000? I can't move across my glasses on one side.
Yes, ma'am. I think that was the Beta Club. They were at 391.83, raised 18,254.91. Spent 18,019.95, and ended the year at 626.79.
All right, Mr. Chair.
All right, no further questions. Thank you, sir, for your very thorough presentation.
You're welcome, and thank y'all.
That's just for informational purposes. That's not an action item. All right, next on the agenda will be issue regarding the student appeal hearing. Essentially, if the board wishes to hear the appeal, the chair will entertain that motion. If no action is taken, then the administrative decision will stand. Is there a motion? Hearing no motion,
I make the motion that we do hear the appeal.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor of hearing the appeal, indicate by raising your right hand. All those opposed? Did you vote twice?
Sorry.
You are in favor, correct, Ms. Hartman?
No.
Okay. Let's do that again. If you're in favor of hearing the appeal, raise your right hand. All right. If you're opposed to hearing the appeal. All right. Then 4-2, the motion fails.
Now, you're that's in the chair. We're going to let you slide.
Thank you, Ms. McCray. All right, next up is board minutes. Is there a motion regarding the board minutes for the October 17, 2017 meeting and the corrected September 19th minutes?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Ms. Smith.
I'd like to make a motion that I just went back
Approve the minutes.
approve the minutes for October with any corrections that can be made in September, providing they get September.
I second.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded that the October 2017 and corrected September 17 minutes be approved. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand.
Well, wait a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, yes, questions, issues, concerns?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to ask on the correction, all the questions that were asked that was in the previous ones that were approved, instead of answering the questions, which is what I requested, they were all taken out.
Okay. Did you submit the form or?
Yes. I just made the statement that, I made one statement that my statement was left out, and I also requested that answers be put in, the ones that had answers.
So, if I could,
Yes,
Mr. Chair, now, so if Ms. Hartman wants to have her statements included in the record, that is her prerogative, but she doesn't have the authority to request someone else's statement.
No, these weren't statements, these were questions that that was decided by whoever to, as part of the discussion, and it was put in there, but the answers weren't put in there. So I was just asking, for the answers that was given answers to be put in the minutes.
Okay.
Instead, everything was all deleted.
Well, we had lots of questions last time about what's supposed to be included in the minutes. Okay, is it discussion or are we? Is it supposed to be a record of actions?
Why was the questions put in there and then not answered?
But as I said, Ms. Hartman, if you request for a statement to be put in the record, that's your right. But in terms of requesting that someone else's statements be put in the record, you don't have the authority to do that.
I'm asking the question, Dr. Green. Why was the previous minutes approved, the approved minutes, they had questions, but there was no answers?
That's my answer, Ms. Hartman.
So what would be wrong with putting those back in there and putting answers to them, the ones that had answers? Maybe some of them didn't have answers. But the ones
Your
that
question
did.
is regarding to previously approved minutes, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well that's not before us right now. What we're voting on right now is September 19th. Do you have any further questions
I
about
thought it was a
September
corrected
19th?
one and the other one. I thought it was together.
It is together. But you said you were talking about approved minutes, and that wouldn't be before us right now.
That would be the ones that were corrected. Actually, it was, I looked back at last meeting, and they were erased from there too.
All right. Well, there's a motion, second on the floor. Do you have any further questions?
Can we have that done? Go back to those originally, the minutes that was approved? and put the answers to them?
You can vote not to approve the minutes, Ms. Hartman.
I voted last time because they weren't in there, not to approve it.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm calling for a point of order, because I ain't never known nobody to approve the minutes, then turn around and start clearing information out of the minutes. So, that needs to be, addressed in some kind of way, because once the minutes have been approved, they've been approved. And somebody asks for correction of something that's in the minutes, that's different from just extracting information from what's been approved.
Yes, ma'am.
So
we can look into that. I didn't notice what's mentioned, so I don't know. That's all I'm saying.
So we need, can you make sure that's on the agenda for the
Yes,
next meeting?
we'll take a look at it.
If we're gonna be extracting things from the minutes, that could be a serious problem later on.
Yes, ma'am, I understand. All right, so the question before us is the approval of the minutes for October and September. All those in favor of approve the minutes indicate by raising your right hand. Opposed? 4-2.
I want to put it on the record that I oppose because it's been changed, the previous ones that were approved, and the questions in it were not answered, which is what was requested for the correction, as part of the correction. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right,
And
Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave that area, for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a question about minutes. So I'm requesting under your, hopefully there'll be a good leadership, that we have a conversation about the minutes and what need to be done. I think it's very unfair, Ms. Brown, to have us up here every time we have a meeting, we discussing the minutes and what should and should not be in them. And even the last meeting, she would chime in as to what we want to get them. So I hope that's something that we're going to discuss. So
I look forward, perhaps we can have a workshop at which time we can all sit down and decide decisively what we want our minutes to be.
can it be like sooner than later?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'd like to address that a little bit later because I wasn't prepared to address that this evening.
Thank you.
I think she's saying sooner or later, in other words, not a year from now.
I got it. I got it. All right. Next is the superintendent.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, just a couple of items. First of all, I want to recognize Mr. Anthony Penn, who has been selected for the 2017-2018 All-State Chorus. To my knowledge, we've not had an individual to be recognized as being selected for the All-State Chorus during my tenure here. And so I'd like to thank the choral director, Mr. Graham, for preparing Anthony and Anthony for going out representing Fairfield Central High School in fine fashion. Also, we recognize the JV football team tonight for having an undefeated season. Coach Roach indicated that some of the players were not here today because they were at varsity practice, and so we were very excited that the varsity football team will host Emerald in the 3rd round of the playoffs. And so we won a tough game this past Friday night against Newberry, and so we'll be moving on to the 3rd round. You know, I think, and I shared this with someone, I think Coach Davis may be the winningest coach in the history of Fairfield Central High School football. Well, I'm saying that was shared with me. If someone was, who was a more winning coach, Mr. McMahon? No.
Yeah.
I think he's talking about total. It's not percentage. Percentage-wise, Coach Beard.
The championship count for 5 games or about 6.
I don't disagree with that sense.
Okay, well, I like that, man. So the living got mad, all right, then I'll do the traditional math.
No disrespect to Coach Davis now, because we do know that he was birthed up under Coach B too, so.
That's right. Well, and I'm quite sure Coach B was extremely excited for Coach Davis.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I want to give Coach Davis his kudos because he has done a tremendous job, and I think we have won 5 or 6 region titles in a row.
I believe it was reported on the sports station in Columbia, we have not lost a region game since 2011.
Yeah, that is actually really awesome. So please come out and cheer on the Griffins as they take on Emerald in the 3rd round. And then finally, I want to say I was a little disappointed that we were meeting on the same night of our first wrestling scrimmage
we have revived the wrestling program here at Fairfield Central High School. I got an opportunity to go in and take a little quick peek at the first wrestling match. You probably noticed that we had lots of cars out, and obviously some of them were people attending the board meeting, but lots of them were individuals attending a wrestling match. And so I'm very excited about reviving this program because it gives students an opportunity to really get engaged who generally are not good fits for basketball or baseball or football. And so there was a young man there today who's wrestling who's probably about 5'2", 105 pounds. And I tell people he can be a championship wrestler at 5'2", 105 pounds. He may never be an all-state football player, basketball player, but you can be a championship wrestler because you wrestle someone your own size. And so we're very excited about that opportunity, and I'm looking forward to some good things coming out of that. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, sir. All right, curriculum instruction.
No.
We've gone till 12 o'clock in the past.
You're not going to the back.
Really? Midnight, yeah.
All right, good evening. Tonight I'm going to present to you the assessment update for the 2016-17 school year. And these results are our state assessments that were administered to our students on last school year. So when you hear me reference 2017, that is referring to the 2016-17 school year. We're going to start first with the 11th grade ACT. Now the 11th grade ACT is a test, or the ACT is a test that's administered to all of our juniors here, not only here at Fairfield Central High School, but also in our state. Now we were very pleased that we saw increases in both English, math, reading, and science, and the overall composite score. In 2016, we showed 14.1 was the composite score, which is an average of English, math, reading, and science, and then we saw an increase of the composite score to 16.1. So we were very pleased with the growth for 2017. Next is the Work Keys assessment, which is also administered to our 11th grade students. And as you can see from this slide, we had an increase in the number of students who earned bronze, silver, and gold. And overall, we had 78% of our students received a certificate. And we had an increase of certificates awarded. In the previous year, we had 130. And in 2017, we had 160 students out of 204 who received a certificate. Next is our dual credit, and this slide represents the percentage of students who actually passed a dual credit course. Now our students take dual credit courses through Midlands Tech. Now if you notice in the far right-hand column on the 2016-17, you will see the percentage of passing of dual credit courses, and you will also see the total number of classes completed for the 2016-17 school year, which was 251. And if you take your finger and go across to the 2012-13 school year, you'll notice that we had a huge increase in the number of students who completed dual credit courses. And we went from 28 in 2012-13 to over 200 classes that were completed by our students here at Fairfield Central High School. And we had 7 classes had 100% passing as it relates to our dual credit courses. So we were very, very pleased overall with the percentage of students who passed the dual credit courses.
Can we maybe in the future have numbers and not along with the percentages? That way we know how many students?
Sure.
Per classes? Thank you.
Next, we're going to talk about the AP or Advanced Placement courses. And as you know, If a student earns a 3 or above on an AP exam, then the student may be offered placement or credit for that particular course when they elect to go to college. And of course, qualified means that the student has proven him or herself capable of doing college work at the introductory level. Now, here are some percentages as it relates to our advanced placement courses. If you note 2015, 2016, and 2017, the total number of students who took the exams was consistently at 71. Many of our students elect to take dual credit courses simply because versus advanced placement courses because the dual credit courses do not require an exam, whereas the advanced placement courses do in fact, you have to take an exam in order to earn a 3 in order to earn the college exam. But if you look at the number of scores, you notice from 2016 to 2017, we had a decrease in the number of students who scored a 1, which is a definite celebration, went from 65 to 42. We had an increase in the number of students who scored a 2, 31% to 45%. And score of 3, we increased by 8 percentage points, which, as I referenced earlier, is considered a qualified score. And then we remained the same or no change of the number of students who scored a 4.
So you're saying that basically 7 to 8 students pass the test?
Actually, I'm getting to the next slide. And that may answer your question. Now the next slide references actual numbers. And so here are the number of students who scored a 3 or above. So in U.S. history, we had 2 students to score a 3 or above. For language composition, we had 1 student to earn a 3 or above, whereas in 2016, we did not have any student to earn a 3 or above in language composition. In calculus, we went from 1 in 2016 to 6 in 2017. And then if you notice overall, we demonstrated an increase in the number of students who scored 3 or above, because in 2016, we had 3 students in 2016, and then in 2017, we had a total of 9. Thank you. Now, our inner course exams, and this shows basically years 2012 to 2017. And as you can tell, in Algebra 1, we did have a slight drop. And what I want to share with you with Algebra 1 and English 1, the state of South Carolina decided to do something called standard setting. And basically what they did was they decided in the summer of 2016, prior to the 2016-17 school year, they decided to change the cut scores. So that's essentially, basically, they decided to reconstruct the plane, fly the plane, and they changed the cut score on our students. So the scores for 2016 and 2017 are on 2 totally different scales. So they really cannot be compared, which resulted in, for Algebra 1, when they did the standard setting, we had more students that earned F's and D's and less students that earned A's. So because of this process that the State Department elected to do, it resulted in the 2016 Algebra 1 and even English 1, those scores to be somewhat different or not being able to be compared.
Okay, wait a minute, I missed something. Because of what happened?
This.
And so can I just speak to that? So you probably remember I presented a report to you that the State Department presented to us about a year ago. And they said that because of an adjustment to the cut scores, that they anticipated we were going to see a pretty sharp decline in the number of students who were successful in Algebra 1. Conversely, they expected that because of the adjustment in cut scores, we would see an increase in the number of students that passed English 1. So in other words, to put it simply, Ms. McDaniel, if you had 20 items before, you may have needed to get 14 items right to score 70 or above, all right? They changed it to say, instead of 14 items, now you gotta get 18 items right, you get a 70 or below. So they just raised the bar. And so it wasn't necessarily that students performed any worse, they just raised the cut score. And so going into this year, we already knew, based on what the State Department presented to us, that there was going to be a significant drop in the percentage of students that were successful in Algebra 1, quite honestly, and Biology 1 as well. And, you know, I am, you know, I guess I'm a little cynical about it because, you know, we were at a point where lots of students were doing well on the Algebra 1 assessment, and the state's response to that is, well, we're going to have to raise the cut scores, as if too many people were doing well. And so we saw a precipitous decline basically across the state of South Carolina, but it was not a surprise. The State Department basically told us that a year ago.
Now, what year was it last year when they went, or are you correlating this to the 10-point grade scale?
Well, and, you know, and ironically, you know, even though we went to a 10-point grade scale, before a passing score was a 70 or better. We went to a 10-point grade scale where a 70 is now a C and a passing score is a 60 or better. Well, we changed the grading scale, but we didn't change the standard needed to represent proficiency on inter-course exam. So the 70 didn't even change. So even though we went from a 70 being a D to a 70 being a C, the 70 still is the same standard. And quite honestly, I think they kept that, Ms. McDaniel, because if they changed that to 60, there would have been too many people passing. And so I think there's always going to be a goal of minimizing the number of students that are successful, unfortunately.
I'd like to backtrack just 1 second to the AP classes. It's showing how many students were in the classes. Do all the students take the test?
Yes. And so you may have some students who elect not to show up, but we encourage every student to show up.
So is there a way of putting that on there, how many take it versus how that didn't take it?
Yeah, we have a list of how many students took it.
So you have a list of how, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that on top of my head, but yeah.
This is showing 71 in the class, so.
So there would have been 71 exams administered.
I thought you just said some might not show up.
Well, I'm saying we expect everyone to show up. I mean, I can't tell you who showed and who didn't show up, but we expect every student to show up. Are you asking me that everyone show up the day of testing?
Yes, sir.
I have no idea.
Is there a way of us having that in this report?
Well, I can tell you that now. Who showed and who didn't show, if that's your question.
So how many didn't show up?
I couldn't tell you right now who showed and who didn't show.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to SC Ready performance levels. Now, SC Ready is a state summative exam or test that is administered to students in grades 3 through 8. And if you notice here, you would see the levels that the students actually are expected to achieve, which consist of exceeding expectation, meets expectations, approaches expectations, and does not meet expectations. And I will tell you that the State Department did the same exact thing that they did with the Algebra 1 and English 1 and changed the cut scores from 2016 to 2017. So of course, these two sets of years cannot be compared because they're based on two different scale scores. But as noted here on the slide, in 2016-2017, students scored 40% were not met or did not meet expectations, 37% in 2017, and meets and exceeded, we had 23% of our students in ELA, whereas in 2017, as it relates to math, we had 25% as compared to 28% in 2016, and then 39% showed an increase there in math, and then 36% in both 2017 and 2016 remained unchanged. And so these are the results from grades 3 through 8, and these are a district percentage.
And I want to share something as it relates to SC rating assessments. And so, you know, one change as they adjusted the cut scores and increased the cut scores was that, as the State Department explains it, what meet or exceeds should represent now is a college-ready standard, which is different than what our standard has been in the past. So in other words, in years past, we would say if you got a third grade student and he's reading on the third grade level, then he's meeting standard. Well, that is no more. So a third grade student reading on the third grade level is not meeting standard. What they say standard is now is based on a projection of making a B or better on a college level course by the time you're a junior in high school. And quite honestly, it perplexes me how you were able to predict that when a kid is in 4th grade. So we have to really understand what that means as we communicate it to parents. And so if a parent looks at SC Ready assessment and says, my child didn't get a meet, they got an approaching, that must mean they aren't reading properly at a 4th grade level. That's not what that means. So if your child is in 4th grade and reading at a 4th grade level, that doesn't necessarily mean he meets the standard they have established. Because their standard is no longer whether you're on grade level. Their standard is whether you're projected to score a B or better on a college level course by the time you're junior in high school, which is a different kind of standard.
So that they make the assessment based on students taking the test, kind of like a snapshot in time. This particular time, they don't take into consideration you can have students taking tests who had catastrophic things happen in their lives and all this kind of stuff and not do well. But yet they want to put it on a scale where they want to project where they want to be years down the road. Yeah. Is that what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, you know, as I said, I'm a little cynical about the motivations here, Ms. McDaniel, but you know, there's almost an assumption, you know, when people say college ready, it's as if we expect every student, first of all, go to a 4-year institution. And so the standards are being set almost with the assumption that everyone is going to a 4-year institution. And you know, so I challenge the State Department when they say college and career ready. No, you aren't talking about college and career ready. What you're talking, you aren't even talking about all colleges. You're talking about strictly 4-year institutions. And so the standard now is, as they say it, a projection of who can be successful at a 4-year college by their junior year of high school, which is quite honestly an impossible prediction in my mind. You know, I think, you know, if you all probably read articles and you said, well, scores have gone down across the state of South Carolina as it relates to intercourse scores, as it relates to SC Ready scores. Well, no one was surprised by that. Because if you say, you know, I'm gonna give you 20 items, and last year you needed to get 14 items correct to meet standard, but this year you gotta get 18 items correct to meet standards. If you perform the same way you performed the previous year, then you're gonna have less students to meet standard. And that's in essence what we did in the state of South Carolina. We just simply raised the bar. And I wanna remind you about how that process works. And I've always took exception to this. They do what they call a benchmarking process. And so by benchmarking, there is no what I would like to say kind of objective measure of how you determine what standard is. So benchmarking is all of us sit in a room, all right? We number the items, say there are 20 items on the test. We number the items from easiest to most difficult. And then we come to consensus about how many items you need to get right to meet standard. So I say, well, out of the 20 items, you need to get 12 right to meet standard. Ms. Harrison said, well, no, I think you need to get 10 right. And you said, no, I think you need to get 15 right. And then we come to consensus about how many items you need to get right to meet standard, and then that's the standard. My issue with that is, that varies depending on who's in the room. And so, if the 10 of us, I mean, if the 8 of us in a room, we come up with one standard. You put 8 different people in a room, they come up with a different set of standards. So it's really not what I like to say an objective process. And you know, I'll tell you what someone from the State Department said is, well, JR, I can assure you that the people in the room were content experts and they represented your interests very well. And my response was, how many people in Fairfield in the room?
Not like that question.
Okay, and the answer to that was no. And so as I told them, I'll trust it when people from Fairfield in the room. Now, I don't know disrespect to the people who were in the room, right, but none of my people that I trust were in the room So I do take some issue with the standard. And this is something, the relative that we'll be faced with. If the state, not necessarily the state, but the Education Oversight Committee, I want to be clear, the Education Oversight Committee is who's responsible for setting cut score. If they continue to do that, they can always have it where schools are unsuccessful. I mean, if you just say, well, if you got to get 15, right, and meet standard, and not people start getting 15, when we change it to 17. Then we change, I mean, it can be arbitrary. And so there needs to be more of an objective process, I think, before you can determine whether students are actually meet standard.
Darren, I've got to bring my t-shirt. Big old F that they started in 1998. And it's been messed up ever since. So what are the leadership organizations in the state doing? I know with the School Board Association they hadn't chimed in yet. It's SCASA.
Well, and so SCASA has not taken an official position on it. Obviously, individual districts such as ours have taken a stand on the Education Oversight Committee and some of the things that they've done. We joined many other districts. As I understand it, Ms. McDaniel, something is supposed to come before the School Boards Association as it relates to their position on the Education Oversight Committee and the Education Accountability Act. Okay. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. But I think we're in a very difficult situation, because if there are people who have the intention of representing schools in a negative light, and they get to set the cut scores, they can always represent schools in a negative light. Yeah, they can always, because they get to determine where the ball is.
Did your F on your shirt stand for fantastic?
If you dyslexic.
All right, moving on to the SC Pass performance results for the 2016-17 school year. And again, that same standard setting took place with the science SC Pass. And the SC Pass is administered to all students in grades 4 through 8. And the SC Pass results from 2016 revealed for science 52%, and then in 2017, 31%. And the same process that Dr. Green just shared regarding the standard setting also took place with science as well. In social studies, we had 61% of our students were met and above, and then in 2017, we had a little under 60% at 59% that were met and above in social studies. Now, our on-time graduation rate, we were very excited to see that we increased from 2016 to 89.9%, and in 2017 we were at 91%. So we were very excited to see that our graduation rate increased on last year. Now, this next slide is a slide that represents or shows the student achievement data for districts with students like ours, and they represent districts that have a poverty index of between less than 5 and more than 5 as it relates to our poverty index. And Fairfield, of course, is highlighted at the top. And if you notice that each of the categories as it relates to SE Ready, ELA, Math, Science, Social Studies, all the way across, we exceeded the average of the 14 districts listed there. So we are outpacing districts that are similar to us as it relates to our poverty index.
And if I could say something to that, I mean, and so there are some areas, as you see, that we are among the top. There's some that we aren't. And so there's a lot from us to be learned there. And I'll give you an example. I looked at U.S. history, and we've come a long way as it relates to intercourse scores in U.S. history. But I look at that one outlying district that had a 80.4% pass rate on U.S. history. And so I'm going to have to call that superintendent to say, man, tell me what you all are doing. Because as you see, they totally are down in the ballpark with anyone else. And so I think there's something to be gained. It's not necessarily for us just to look and say, well, we're doing better than this person. In some instances, we'll look and say, well, this person is doing better than us. So give us some insight, in terms of what you're doing. And so and when you have similar populations, I think that's a more meaningful conversation as opposed to an area where that has, 5% of the kids on poverty. When I can say, well, you have some of the similar challenges that we have, and yet you found a way to make that happen. We want to model what we're doing by what you're doing. So,
you know what's interesting though? If you look at their if you look at the for that District 14, if you look at how high the scores are to the left under all those different categories, but then when you look at and most of them they far exceed the other districts, but then when you look at ACT composite, they right in line with them.
and so that's an excellent point, Mr. McDaniel. So you look at ACT composite, and that's where every third-year student has to take the ACT, of which we disagree with, because you're talking about self-contained kids who don't want to college, we're making every kid take it. But at Fairfield Central High School, our 16.3 was as high as any district that we're compared to. There may be one other district that had 16.3, and the district that had the 80.4% had a 15.8. And so conversely, that district may say, well, hey, what did you all do to get over 16 in terms of the ACT scores? And so I think there's something to be learned. And so no one is necessarily, if you look over the scores, no one particular district is outpacing everyone in all metrics. But there are, some who say, well, we're outpacing them on most, but then there's some that we can, there's obviously some room for growth.
And it's still a concern if you outpace it on most, but then when you get over to the ACT composite, you less than most. Interesting.
These different districts, is it possible to have the district names on them?
It's so, and I thought about that, Ms. Hartman. I am reluctant to do a public forum and list districts. I'll tell you, I'll just call out a few names of districts that are included without identifying them. Collington is included. Clarendon 1, Ms. McDaniel is included. Calhoun County is included. I mean, so, those are some districts without identifying, but I wouldn't want to present someone else's data in a public forum. I think that'd be a little inappropriate on my part. But that's just a snapshot of some of the districts that have similar populations to ours in terms of poverty.
Also, can we look at maybe districts around us in the central Midlands area?
And you could. What I would say to that, Ms. Hartman, I don't think, me personally, that is a fair or reasonable comparison. I think if you go to, I'll just pick a school that's a neighborhood school. You go to, Chapin High School, and I'm just guessing that may have a poverty index of, 7%, and you want to compare it to a school with a poverty index of 80%, I think you're comparing apples and oranges. And the challenges that you're talking about are totally different. And, that's like if someone said, what percentage of students from Fairfield County matriculated to a 4-year institution after graduation? Well, the reality is the percentage of students that matriculated to a 4-year institution after graduation is going to be lower in an area of high poverty than an area of affluence. And that's a function of a lot of factors. The number one factor that determines whether a student matriculates to a 4-year institution is not the school he or she attends, but the educational level of his or her parents. And so I don't know what you gain if you were comparing apples and oranges. So that's why I think I can go to Ms. Swilly, I can go to Ms. Whitfield, I can go to principals here to say, let's talk about how schools are performing who have similar challenges versus let's talk about how schools are performing that don't have the challenges you have. There's nothing really for them to really be gained from that.
Other than, as we say, is our children can compete in the state just as other schools can. So that gives us an idea of the surrounding areas possibly to compete with.
Well, but I want to be clear about this. Our students are competing with students all over the state. Right. And so when you look at this data, Ms. Harper, you're talking about what I call aggregate data. That has nothing to do with whether you have students who are performing at the highest level. Obviously, we have students that perform at the highest level based on what we just saw a minute ago, But I often give people this example. And I give you a small sample. If you had a teacher to give an assessment to 10 students, and you had 7 students to make a 90 on the assessment, and you had 3 students to make a 50 on the assessment, that's a 78 average. Now some people would say there's nothing extraordinary about a 78 average, but you don't know anything about the students that made a 50. That doesn't necessarily mean the students who made a 90 are any less smart than the students all over the state, all over the country. When you're talking about aggregate data, you have to put all that into account. And so the example I gave you, maybe one of the students who made a 50 was a self-contained student. Maybe one of them was a student who was homeless. Maybe the third student was pregnant and she missed 45 days of school. That provides some context. And so that doesn't suggest, because aggregate data is not the same as an affluent area, that our students are not performing on the same level. The reality is that an affluent area has less students that are homeless, and they're going to have less students that are pregnant, and they're going to have less exceptional ed students, and less students who have experienced the trauma of what poverty brings. But that doesn't mean that our students are not performing at the absolute highest level, because aggregate data does not speak to that.
I would say that, like I said, that our kids are able to do this, and so therefore sometimes give data to that effect as well. Thank you.
And lastly, we wanted to conclude with some district achievements. While we saw some of the district achievements for Fairfield Magnet School on earlier, from the 2016-17 school year, we had 44 students that qualified for the Duke Tip Talent Search. We had 1 third-grade student achieve a perfect score on the SC Ready math assessment. We had 108 students achieved in the 80th percentile on the SC Ready ELA assessment. We also had 96 students achieve in the 80th or above percentile on the SC Ready math assessment. And we also had 29 students achieve a score of 100 on an inter-course assessment. And we also lastly had 1 student achieve a score of 31 on the ACT. And so this concludes my presentation, my assessment update for the 2016-17 school year. If there are any questions, Dr. Green will address them.
Another question is the students for the Duke Tip Scholars, what ages does that go from what age to what age?
Yeah, and so students can qualify as Duke Tip Scholars beginning in 3rd grade, I think it is, Ms. Hartman, and they can qualify up through 7th grade, 7th or 8th grade.
Thank you.
And so that's a very good question, Ms. Hartman, because when you start talking about students performing at the highest level, I mean, that's an indication. I mean, students will, in order to qualify as a Duke Tip Scholar, you have to score, I think, in the 95th percentile. And so obviously, you know, we have students who are performing at the absolute highest level. And so I think it's always dangerous when you start judging schools simply on aggregate data, because aggregate data doesn't necessarily tell a story. I mean, sometimes it talks more about who didn't do well than who did do well when you start talking about aggregate data. And you know, I'll tell you one thing, and I don't want to belabor this, but you know, one thing that has bothered me with the state of South Carolina with mandating that all students take the ACT their junior year, whether they want to go to college or not, whether they self-contained or not. Regardless, you're going to make every student take the ACT. See, that is actually, in my opinion, discriminatory towards high poverty districts, because you will have a larger percentage of students who are not aspiring to go to 4-year institution. And that doesn't mean they are aspiring to do great things. You may have a larger percentage of students who enlist in the military. You may have a larger percentage of students who decide they're going to go to Tech and get a welding degree. You may have a larger percentage of students who decide that they're going to join the family business. We're going to have to get out of this mindset that if you are pursuing a 4-year college, then somehow you are less than, and that obviously puts a school with a high poverty population at a disadvantage, because there are less students as a percentage who are aspiring to go to a 4-year institution than an affluent area.
And plus the curriculum and the teachers make a difference too, also.
Well, and so I tell you what, we'll tell a story this year, Ms. McDaniel, because I think you had lots of people to really illustrate why that was not a wise thing to do. The state has changed it for this year. And so the state says that we're no longer going to force every third-year student to take the ACT. Students will be able to elect to take it. And so I can assure you, because students are elected to take it, guess what's going to happen? Competency score is going to go up. Because we aren't forcing kids to take it who don't want to take it. All right? If you don't want to take it and someone says, I'm going to make you take it, guess what's going to happen? You're going to go into the test, and you're going to just start checking things to get out of there. Okay? So when you make people take a test who don't want to take it, because they don't aspire to go to a four-year institution, that's what you get. But with all that said, I want to give the high school lots of credit, because even with that, they still saw increases in their composite ACT averages. And that's probably a function of kids really doing their best for the staff here. I mean, I think Ms. Swilly has sold them on, even though you don't want to do it, I need you to do it for us. Do your best for us. Because if you go in there and you just start checking numbers, you really hurt the school. Okay? And so kids obviously have bought into that, and at least more of them are really putting forward their best efforts.
I've said this in the past that, you know, not necessarily going to four-year college is still okay, but don't ever rule out going to a four-year college. Thank you.
Dr. Green, the students from the alternative school, they take the test too?
Yes, ma'am. So every student has a test who's enrolled. Yeah. GOA, homebound, regardless. And you could be homebound, Ms. McDaniel, and we have to bring you in to test. Yeah. Every student is required to test.
Which means we have to bring them. We have to go get them.
When I say we, yeah, I mean, we tell the parents you got to bring them in. Yeah, we don't have to physically get them, but yeah, if you enroll, you're required to.
Well, I thought they changed stuff. Send that bus out there and get the babies.
All right, anything else on the assessment? Next, I think we have field trip.
We have two overnight field trip requests. One for Fairfield Central High School Gospel Choir was invited to Washington, D.C. in April. And we also have Fairfield Magnet School for Math and Science. Their fifth grade students would like to travel to Washington, D.C. In March.
And I always like to reiterate, Mr. Chair, we aren't asking to vote for any money. Just approval of the trip. Okay, just for clarify.
Thank you, sir. Question I wanted to ask. Mr. Wilton.
I'd like to make a motion. To the recommendation, the board to approve the overnight field trip for both of these.
Second.
Okay. All right, we'll take that as a motion and a second to approve the field trip for the magnet school and for the high school gospel choir. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. All those opposed, I believe it is 6-0. Thank you. Okay, next up.
Next item is first reading of policy ILBA, which is a new policy entitled Use of Data for Monitoring Student Success and Achievement. And this policy is coming before you tonight as a result of our advanced data accreditation external review team visit that took place back in 2014. So as a part of our commitment toward continuous improvement, we have to develop, implement, and approve a policy that helps support the data analysis of the data that we have, whether it's state, formative, or summative assessment. So the policy that you have before you outlines how we plan to evaluate district programs, how we plan to ensure access to data sources, and how we plan to monitor student success and achievement through the use of data.
All right, is there a motion regarding first reading? So it's first reading, so it'll be on the agenda again next month too. But first reading regarding policy ILBE, if I can read.
I will approve first reading of policy ILBA.
Second.
We'll get Pastor Jackson in a second on that. All right. So it's been motioned and seconded to give first reading to policy ILBA. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand.
I think that's IK, by the way. ADD.
I think you might want to look at one
I'm
of
on
them.
the wrong one. I'm sorry.
All right, was that,
ILD.
was everybody in favor? Ms. Hartman? Okay. All right, so it's 6. All right, next, Ms. Hartman's favorite one.
Was she already voted on?
Yeah, she already approved it.
The next policy in the fourth item is policy IKADD, the administrative role along with the policy, content and credit recovery. And the State Board of Education adopted the South Carolina Uniform Grading Policy that, of course, is implemented in all South Carolina public schools. And as a result of that, all districts have to create and approve a content and credit recovery policy. This policy was provided by the South Carolina School Boards Association, and it also was reviewed by our attorneys.
All right, do we have a motion regarding policy IKADD? And it looks like -R and -E as well.
I make a motion, we accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the first reading for policy IKADD -R and -E.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded. Is there any discussion? I forgot to ask last time, and I figured y'all jump in. Anyway, okay, all right, anybody, all those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. No opposition, 6-0. Thank you. Financial operation.
In your board packets under finance and operations, you have the finance report for board review for the month of October 2017.
Any questions for Mr. Robinson?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question on stipends for this year. I know we voted on it quite a while back. Have those been given out to all the head departments, the department heads?
And so I'm assuming most of them have this Hartman. There may be some, you know, for example, off the top of my head, if you're talking about a spring sport, maybe that stipend hasn't been assigned yet, or an activity that occurs in the spring, or if the stipend is spread out over the year. But for the most part, most of them have been assigned. There may be a few that remain to be dispersed.
Do we have a way of checking that the people that are receiving those? Because I've gotten calls that some teachers have not received it.
Ms. Hartman, I can tell you, I've been in education 27 years. I've never met a teacher who let a stipend go unassigned that didn't come and say something about it. And so I can assure you, if they haven't received a stipend, they're going to be saying something to the principal and surely saying something to me. I would doubt very seriously that someone went and didn't get a stipend and didn't say anything about it.
Why would they pick up the phone and call me?
I have no idea, Ms. Hartman. I don't know why they didn't call me. Tell them to call me. Next time they call me, tell them to call me. I'll be happy to address it.
You don't think that gets them in trouble with their principals?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you do receive a stipend, you don't want to hold your money. You know, that's not going to get anybody in trouble. That's all. I mean, that's like saying we didn't pay Coach Davis his stipend, and so how they gonna get him in trouble? I mean, he deserved the stipend.
What other reason would a teacher call me?
That's a very good question, Ms. Hartman. Yeah, I don't know what's the reason they wouldn't call me. Please tell them to call me. I want to take care of that for them.
Is there a way you're checking to make sure the ones that are supposed to be getting it, and double checking on? I've asked this in the past, and you know,
and Ms. Hartman,
it didn't get resolved then either. So I'm trying to figure out a way. How do you resolve it?
So what I'll say, Ms. Hartman, is I've not had any staff members that come to me and say they haven't received their stipend.
I'd like to put that on the record, what I just stated. Thank you.
Can you please restate it so I can get exactly what
Could the administration check that all the people that are the teachers in schools receive their stipends for the year? The ones that are the head of their departments. Thank you.
Any further questions on operations 5? All right, human resources.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. For your approval this evening, under Human Resources, we have certified resignations as where the superintendent recommends board approval for resignations and terminations for certified staff members as indicated in Exhibit 1 and requires special motion.
Thank you. Any motion regarding to certified resignation termination?
Mr. Chair, I move that a formal complaint be sent on behalf of the board to the State Board of Education requesting the appropriate action be taken against professional employees of Fairfield County School District, employees 1 and 2, whom pursuant to South Carolina Code annotated section 59-25-230 breach their employment contracts with the district by failing to return to work.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
You want to credit that to him?
Yeah.
All right, we'll give that to Pastor Jackson. All right, it's been motion and second. All those in favor of forwarding this to the State Board of Education for action, please indicate by raising your right hand. All those opposed? It's 4-2 in favor.
I want to put on the record that when we have situations like this, I think we need to have documented in writing why the teachers are leaving. Thank you.
All right, board chair report. Wow, that's me.
Yeah, that's you.
All right. Y'all look in board docs, and of course you see the training calendar for school board associations in the state, national. And of course we've got intergovernmental meeting, which I believe is Town of Winsboro this time.
Yeah.
It's on the 13th, so you see the invitation there. It's on December 13th at the Women's Club. We're on Vanderhorst. Please RSVP, and I'm sure I'll forget to do so. So I'm sure Ms. Wallace or Ms. Brown will remind me of that. Next thing, of course, we need to nominate a new delegate for the upcoming meeting in December. I believe Ms. Reed was the delegate. I believe Pastor Jackson, I think you were the alternate. The chair will entertain a motion to.
Can I ask a question before you put motion?
Sure.
I know quite normally we would probably, I guess, move the chair to that position. Reverend Jackson,
Yes.
you want to be the delegate?
Well, I was the alternate.
And I can't go.
I'll just make it there.
Okay, the reason I asked is there's some things that need to be addressed from the floor. So if, and I would give you by virtue of your position and the fact that you want to be it to you, but if you could get with me and I may need to address or support, if you will, some of the things that possibly will come up.
All right, well, the board has to decide if they want me to be here.
Oh, you got that part.
And so, Mr. Chair and members of the board, so I think what we have to do, if I understand, is to submit a name for an alternate. And so Pastor Jackson will move into Ms. Reed's spot, and then we have to submit a name for an alternate as well.
Right, but I was just being clear on that because I think when the chair opened it up, he was opening it up as though both of them were vacant. So I just want to make sure Mr. Jackson wanted to, and if so, that he would commit to at least reviewing the information that I'm referring to and see if he would support and or maybe address this from the floor. And one of the things, and not to mess up the emotion, but one of the things is when the regional directors are nominated to the school board association, they're voted on by everybody. Which, Greenville and Charleston have numerous votes, and they can really dictate who basically sits on the state board. So one of the requests is going to be that the regions vote, the members of that particular region vote for the persons who represent that region instead of everybody voting on. So
we only get one vote.
right, but see if they change it where the region vote, then like for our region it'll be out Fairfield, Newberry, Chester, Chesterfield, Lawrence, 56, 55, and Newberry, or whatever the other district. Those would be the only districts that would vote for the regional director for region, whatever this number is, the number is region 12. Instead of everybody voting. Because see, if everybody vote, you go politic with Charleston and Greenville, they're going to decide who that representative is versus the folk who actually serve in that district.
Now when it gets done stronger, they're going to listen again. I don't mean to cut you off, but y'all talk about this.
Yeah, we will. I just want to give you one example of what I was referring to.
Okay, so it sounds like we're okay with Pastor Jackson moving up, so we need to vote on an alternate.
Right.
We have a nomination for an alternate.
Annie McDaniel, I think she knows what's going on more so than probably anybody else.
Well, aren't you already going to be there as board member?
Yeah, but I don't get that, if you can't be there, I won't be able to go to the floor.
Is there a second on this one?
She's there, she's
All right, so this.
Oh, no, I can do it. I don't care. Yeah, I can do it. If y'all are okay with that.
I second the alternate.
All right, there's motion second, Mr. Daniel be the alternate. All those in favor, raise your right hand. I don't believe there's any opposition. Congratulations, Mr. Daniel. You gonna lie to yourself to vote in favor?
No.
All right, I don't see anything else on there. Does anybody have anything? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your right hand.
Fifth.
Adjourn.
Hey, baby. Yeah,